Well, today is our second to last week in our series on 9 weeks in, I still can't get it right. Fascinating stories from forgotten lives. I always flip them around. I don't know why. It's frustrating. So we're on number 9 over here, our warrior today. And next week will be our last one in this series. And I'm just going to let you know as well, it's going to be my last Sunday for the summer. For a while, I'm going to take some time off and have a sabbatical, and so this will be this next 2 today and next week will be my last 2 for the rest of the summer, and that won't affect you at all. You'll still be here just like always, but I won't be. So I look forward to seeing you again in September. And don't worry, we're going to have some great guest speakers in the meantime, and it's going to be a lot of good stuff while I'm gone, but I look forward to having a little time away. Our topic today is the kind of inevitable things of life, the unexpected things of life. And I'm not talking like the little things, like this morning, Josiah is off right now. He's with some other youth, and we got a call at 1:30 that he had gotten sick in the middle of the night, right? I mean, that's unexpected. And I didn't sleep well, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Today we're talking about the really big unexpected things. Sometimes they're positive. Like sometimes we have that unexpected thing, hey, you just got a triple raise, right? And you're like, yay, I didn't expect that. But normally the unexpected things are negative, right? They're the phone calls that you didn't expect. They're the accident you didn't see coming. It's the doctor's appointment that you didn't want to have, but you knew you had to. It's those sort of things, right? And kind of what I want us to think about today is when those things happen, because they happen for all of us, right? How do we respond? What's our response to the unexpected? Maybe we want to take control of the situation because the unexpectedness makes us realize we're out of control, right? And so our natural instinct is to get control of the situation however we can. Natural response, I get it, right? As someone who likes to be in control, that's my tendency. Like, how can I take control of this? Maybe we try to fix it. And guys, we're really good at this. Like, there's a problem, we want to fix it, right? But many times these things are out of our control. We can't fix them. And we try and we try and we try and we try, but it's just in vain because we can't fix it. It's out of our control. Maybe we just get angry about it. Like somehow we feel like there's been this injustice, this cosmic injustice by God against us, that this thing would happen. And so we're just angry about it. Or the opposite, we just check out. We just like throw our hands up and we're like, I give up. And we're tempted to just walk away from whatever, right? And just ignore it, act like it's not there. What really though is a healthy response to unexpected? What's a faithful response? What is a response that is reflective of our faith, of what we say we believe? And so today, as we look at this man named Naaman, we're going to see a man who had something unexpected happen. His story is found in 2 Kings chapter 5, if you want to turn there. It's kind of in the heart of this tumultuous time of Israel's history, where there was a division. There was a north and a south. They'd been fighting. They're on different pages. The north is very unfaithful. The south is kind of up and down and a little rocky in their approach. This story takes place in the northern kingdom. So you kind of get that picture in your head of the kind of environment this is. Folks and leadership and things that are generally not following God, that are generally unfaithful. And so we're introduced in chapter 5, verse 1 to this man named Naaman. It says that Naaman, the commander of the king of Syria's army. So he isn't Israelite, okay? He's Syrian, a country to the north, a neighboring country to the north. He's a commander. It says he is the commander of the king's army. So he's like the top dog. He's the general, right? He's at the top of the pile. It says he was esteemed and respected by his master, by the king. So evidently he's really good at what he does. And I try to picture, this time period, we're talking several hundred years, let's say like 500-ish plus years before Christ. What does a warrior look like? What kind of guy is such a good warrior that he gets to be the big dog? A tough guy, right? This guy has been through many battles, probably since he was a teen. He's probably killed many people. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's smart. He's strong. I'm sure he's very self-sufficient, a rugged guy, intense. And when he's rose to this position, you know that he is in charge. Whatever room he walks into, unless the king is there, this guy's in charge. So he knows what he wants. He's confident. He can command people. When he says go take the hill, people go take the hill. When he says jump, they jump. Because he invokes fear and respect. And he commands the room. I picture this very rugged warrior. In my mind, I'm picturing like the movie Gladiator, right? And this just like other culture, just ruggedness to him. And so here he is. He's very good at what he does. This is who he is his whole life. Everything he knows is out of being a warrior. And there's this interesting statement that says, for through him, the Lord had given Syria military victories. Now that's a really odd statement when you consider he's not Israelite. And when you also consider the fact that of all of Israel's enemies at the moment, Syria is one of them. We're going to see here in just a couple verses how Syria would consistently attack Israel. And if you keep reading past chapter 5, it doesn't take you long to see Syria just outright invade Israel. Yet this statement is very clear that through Naaman, God had given Syria many victories. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? Here's a man who was being used of God and didn't even know it, probably. Even though he was on the wrong side of the political line, God was using him and them for his purposes. And then we get this last sentence, but. But is a contrast word, right? Whenever you see but, it means whatever came before it and whatever came after it are contrasting each other, flipping around. So here we have the first sentence and a half, 2 sentences, whatever it is, that depict for us this strong military commander. But this great warrior had a skin disease. Now, none of us really know what he had. The conjecture by most scholars is that it was probably leprosy, but we don't know, right? And so I'm picturing this in my mind. This powerful warrior, this man who was revered, who has everything that every young boy would ever want, right? The title, the power, the reputation. And one day he looks down and he sees that sore develop on his arm. And he's in denial about what maybe it could be. Or maybe he just overlooks it and think, well, I was in a little skirmish last week. It must be just something from that. It's no big deal. And then a week or two later, there's 2 of them. And then a month later, there's some on this arm too, and those look worse, not better. And the process of what would go through his mind of going from ignoring it to wrestling with it but denying it to being confronted with it. Knowing that in their culture, leprosy is something you get ostracized for. It isn't like in our culture, many of us have had this where we've had this suspicion like we feel something different, or there's a pain, there's a sore, whatever, and like at first we're like, it's no big deal, right? And then we're like, okay, I probably should go get this checked out. And as a community, we rally around each other, right? We rally around one another saying, oh, you have this diagnosis or that. How can we help you? Can we? Not with this. with this, you're pushed aside. You're dirty, you're unclean. You're contagious. And so to have leprosy, if that in fact is what it is, meant that everything that his life had been about is now in jeopardy. All of it. That theoretically, he goes from the top of the pile to out of the pile. And so I picture verse 1, this simple little verse. You probably just read over it and not think a thing about it, right? But what was happening in his heart, in his mind, that wrestling match that's happening with his own mortality, with his own position in the world, his life as he knows it. Verse 2 says that there were some raiding parties, the Syrian raiding parties, who went out of Syria into Israel and took captive a young girl. And she became the servant of Naaman's wife. Now, I get the impression from this, Naaman wasn't part of the raid, but his folks, the folks he commanded, they did one of their typical raids where we go into Israel, we pick a town, and we attack it, and we take whatever it is we want or can out of that town. And one of them, the things they took happened to be a teenage girl. Now, I want you to put yourself in her shoes for a moment. She's going to be a big part of this story. And so she gets brought back as a slave, essentially, war plunder, and brought into Naaman's home as a servant. And so she told her mistress, that's Naaman's wife, if only my master were in the presence of the prophet who is in Samaria, that's back in Israel, in northern Israel, the northern kingdom, then he would cure him of his skin disease. Now this girl, she could hear what was happening in the household. And I'm sure in public, Naaman was covering everything he could. With his clothing, his regalia, his armor, whatever it may be, he was trying to keep these things hidden. But in private, I'm sure it was talked about. And so here's this young girl, we don't know how old, I picture like a teenager, who's serving in the house. And it says something about her. Because you put yourself in her shoes. She is a slave who's been taken captive, and yet she does something quite caring, quite loving. To say, hey, you who have me captive and enslaved, I think I can help you. That's important, isn't it? That even in the midst of it, she loved them well. And so she says, hey, there's this prophet. We're going to find out here in a second, the prophet's name is Elisha. Not Elijah, he's the more known one. Elisha, E-L-I-S-H-A, Elisha was actually the successor to Elijah. And hey, I think that if you were to go to him, that he could heal you. That he could cure this skin disease. And so you put ourselves in Naaman's shoes. This is exciting, isn't it? I'm sure, maybe not, but I'm sure that maybe he had gone to some of the witchcraft folks in their community and been like, hey, do you have any cures if somebody happened to have had this kind of skin disease? Not me, but somebody. Could you help them? And probably to no avail, right? And so here she makes this suggestion. Tells you a little bit about their feelings for her, their relationship with her as well, that they would even listen to her. But she makes this suggestion. And so Naaman went and told his master, that's the king, what the girl from the land of Israel had said. Now, this would be a risk because, of course, we don't know if the king knew or not. But here he's going to the king saying, hey, king, I have this disease that normally ostracizes us. And this girl thinks she can help. The king could have just said, all right, you're out of here. Get out of my presence. Go. You're done. And send him off. So he took a risk even going to the king. He goes to the king and says, hey, here's what the girl said. And the king of Syria says, go. And my Bible has an exclamation point there. Go. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman went taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 suits of clothing. So this tells you the relationship Naaman and his king had, right? Ben-Hadad II was the king. That evidently Ben-Hadad very much valued Naaman because he just sent him with some very important things. A letter and a pile of valuable stuff. I looked it up. Let me see if I can find it here. I might have turned my page too fast. Let me look. Wrong page. Here we go. 750 pounds of silver. 750 pounds. That's a lot of silver. 150 pounds of gold is what that is equivalent to. Now, you think of that value. You can do the math in your head, like values per ounces per whatever. This is a lot of valuable stuff. Suits, like I'm sure they didn't go to the secondhand store and pull some suits out. Sure, these were fine Syrian clothing he sent. Plus this letter of authority, giving the authority of the king to Naaman, the kind of a reference, if you will, to go to the king of Israel and say, hey, will you help me? And so he sets off and he goes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel. And it read, "This is a letter of introduction for my servant Naaman, who I have sent to be cured of his skin disease." When the king of Israel, his name is Joram, by the way, is who we think it is. We're not quite sure where this fell in the timeline, but it's probably Joram. Joram, he read it, and he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill or restore life? Why does he ask me to cure a man of this skin disease? Certainly you must see that he is looking for an excuse to fight me." Now, if you know the reputation of the Syrians, the last thing you want is a fight with the Syrians. They were renowned for their, shall we say, gruesome war tactics. They invented psychological warfare. They knew how to kill people in more ways than anybody and to make it as gruesome as possible. And so, of course, Joram did not want to fight, but he feels stuck. He feels like this is a trick. Why would the king that keeps raiding us, keeps antagonizing us, why would he send this high-ranking warrior to me to do something I can't do? It must be a trick. And you figure his position, if I don't cure him, now he's going to be mad because I didn't cure him and he'll attack. And if I do cure him, which he feels like he can't, like I can't do it, but even if I could, I'm actually healing one of his best assets to be used back against me. He's in a tough spot. And so he tears his clothes. This is a sign of like grief. Like, oh, right? So he tears his clothes. He's like, what do I do? He's kind of freaking out. He feels stuck by this guy who showed up needing healed and the letter that accompanied him. And when Elisha, the prophet, heard that the king had torn his clothes, that he reacted this way, he sent this message to the king. "Why did you tear your clothes? Send him to me so that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood in the doorway of Elisha's house. Elisha sent out a messenger who told him, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan. Your skin will be restored and you will be healed." Now, I love Elisha's response. Elisha's like, "Hey, king, have you forgot about me? Like, why are you being a negative Nancy here? Why are you being so pessimistic? Why are you like just claiming defeat before anything? Like, what about me?" It tells you where Joram was probably right at spiritually, right? He didn't even give thought to maybe a prophet of God could help this situation. Because remember, they were the less faithful of the bunch. They were the kingdom that went away from God the fastest. And so I'm sure, just like in last week's story, Micaiah was one of the few faithful prophets still left. Elisha is one of the few faithful prophets still around now as we've progressed even further down the road. And Joram didn't even give thought about it. He's like, I can't do it. What do we do? I'm scared. And Elisha's like, send him to me. I can help. Send him over. And so he sends that message, and so they send Naaman over, and I picture him pulling up to Elisha's house with his whole entourage, the horses and the chariots, and his guys guarding him, and the guys serving him, and all this, and like this whole group pulling up. And you notice, though, it says that he stood in the doorway of Elisha's house. He didn't go in. Now, you picture this scenario. You have a high-ranking official that everywhere he goes, he's the center of the room unless the king's there, right? And he doesn't even get to come inside. You just get to stand here at the doorway. A man of this stature, of this position in the world, that now because of his skin condition is kept at an arm's distance. You stay there, not here. I'm not welcoming you in as an honored guest. You stay there. And then you notice Elisha didn't even go talk to him. He sent a messenger. It's like he comes and he stays back there. And he's like, well, I was told to come and to see this guy. And he like pulls the thing out like, Elisha? Is that the guy? Yeah, Elisha. Okay, I'm here to see Elisha and see I have this thing I was hoping he could help me out with. And they're like, ooh. We'll go let him know. And they come in and they're like, hey, Elisha, there's this guy here. And he's, okay, so what Elisha told you to do was to go wash in the river 7 times. Now, if you're a man of this stature, this is not the response you normally get. You're usually welcomed in, you're honored, you're lifted up because of your position. And now because of what has happened, this thing completely outside of his control, he's left at the doorway with a mere messenger. And we see here in verse 11 what Naaman thought of this prescription he was just prescribed. Naaman went away angry. He said, look, I thought for sure he would come out and stand there and invoke the name of the Lord, his God, wave his hand over the area and cure the skin disease. I was sure he'd come out and personally do some abracadabra in God's name, poof. That's not what he did. He didn't even come out. He goes on, the rivers of Damascus, where he's from, the area where they're from, the Banya and the Pharpar, they're better than any of the waters of Israel. Like, he sent me to the Jordan, that dirty river. Of all the rivers, I could have gone and washed in one of our rivers. Why do I got to go to their river? Could I not wash in them and be healed? So he turned around and went away angry. He came seeking a solution. He was given the solution. It wasn't the solution he wanted. And so he was angry. That's kind of like us as humans, isn't it? We want it our way. And when God's way isn't our way, we can get a little frustrated about it, right? God, I was hoping you would do it this way. When God's like, no, we're going this way. We're like, come on, God. It's like, no. Just go to the Jordan and wash yourself 7 times. Like that. That's all you got to do. And it's funny here. One of his servants in verse 13 approaches him. This guy has guts. He approaches him and he's like, Master, just a thought here. If the prophet had told you to do something really difficult, you would have done that, right? He's going at his ego a little bit here, right? But in this case, it seems you should be happy that he simply said, go and wash and be healed. Like if he'd have said, all right, the way to get healing is to do 1,000 push-ups consecutively with no breaks, Naaman would have been like, all right. I can do that, right? He's like, no, just go wash. And the servant's like, you should at least try, right? Like, why are you upset? This is easier than you thought it would be. It reminds me of how many of us view salvation. We have to work our way to God. We have to make God proud of us. So we have to keep continuing to achieve, to earn God's pride in us. And God's like, you see that cross? It's just about faith in Jesus. If you just follow him. And so it's like, no, but I got to work for it, right? I mean, I'm not good enough. It's like, just Jesus. And sometimes, whether we know it or not, we react the same way Naaman did to salvation, the way he did to healing. Is we feel like it has to be more complicated than this, right? And we kind of twist it and contort it into something that fits what our hearts maybe are most wrestling with at that moment. Whether it's achievement, whether it's hurts, whether it's wrongs and forgiveness, whatever it may be, we feel like it has to be that, right? Because it has to be harder than this. And God's like, no, it's just Jesus. Just believe in him. Trust him with your life. Every day, walk with him, trusting him for today and for eternity. That's it. And many times we walk away angry. But the servant piques his interest, and Naaman says, yeah, maybe you're right. And so he goes down and he dips in the Jordan 7 times as the prophet had instructed. And his skin became as smooth as a young child's, and he was healed. You notice he wasn't just healed. He was restored back to new, like that of a young child. Picture a warrior. What a BC 5th century warrior's skin would look like. And then add leprosy on top. And now it's like a young child's. He was beyond healed. Healed would have been going back to just a 5th century warrior's skin. He went back to a young child, washed anew, just like we are. And so in verse 15, we get his response. He and his entire entourage returned to the prophet Elisha. Naaman came, and he didn't stand in the doorway this time. He stood before him. And he said, for sure, I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, please accept a gift from your servant. He recognizes whatever his faith had been before, probably some pagan form of religion and believing in whatever god or gods, he recognized the God of Elisha, Yahweh, the God of Israel. And he says, accept this gift. But Elisha replied, as certainly as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will take nothing from you. Naaman insisted that he take it, but he refused. Naaman said, if not, then give your servant a load of dirt, enough for a pair of mules to carry, for your servant will never again offer a burnt offering or a sacrifice to a god other than the Lord Yahweh. Now this is really interesting. I scratched my head with the dirt. Can I be honest with you? Maybe you are too. You're like, what's with the dirt? Have you ever done this? Maybe you've gone to a place that maybe like in your family history or in your personal history, you've gone back to a place that was significant. And have you ever taken some of the dirt home with you? I actually did this once. I'm not going to tell you when or where because I'm sure customs wouldn't be happy with it. But I've heard of even like soldiers who fought a battle at a particular place. Later in life, they go back to that place and they take some of the sand from that beach, right? It's the idea that the soil of this place represents a moment in time, a significant event to you. And even though it's just dirt or sand or whatever it may be, it's significant, right? Because of what it represents. And so he's asking for enough dirt, a big enough pile of dirt. I picture like pack mules with some bags on the side that they're like shoveling some of the dirt in so he can take it back as like this reminder, this keepsake of what he views as holy ground, this place where his life totally changed, where it had changed from this path to this path, and now because of Elisha in this place, it changed again. And for him, this was important. And so he wanted to, at least, can I take some dirt home if you won't accept my gift? On a side note, we never found out what happened to the silver and gold. Did the king keep them, or did they get to take them home? I'm just curious. So verse 18, may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. So this is Naaman asking Elisha, will you forgive me and your God forgive me for this one thing? That when my master, the king, enters the temple of Naaman to worship, and he leans on my arm, and I bow down in the temple of Naaman, meaning I bow down with him when he is worshiping, and I have to bow down with him in supporting him, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. And Elisha said to him, go in peace. He's giving all of his devotion to Yahweh, not to the gods they had. Now there's a little side note here that's kind of funny, I think. The word Naaman is not actually the name of the Syrian god. The name of the Syrian god is Raman. Raman means thunderer. That's a great god, right? Thunderer. Guess what Ramon means? Pomegranate. Not the same thing. This is a Jewish scribe, a Hebrew scribe, making fun of the Syrians. I'm just going to swap a couple letters here, making it totally different. Which is kind of funny. I like it. Those sort of like human side of all this, right? Just poking a little fun at them. The story ends with one of Elisha's servants chasing after Naaman when he leaves and saying, I'll take that gift you offered. Because the crux of this section of Scripture is actually about Elisha. We're talking about Naaman today, but it's actually about Elisha and his character, his godliness, and that he wouldn't accept payment for something that was invaluable, a healing, but this other servant would. And so it's about Elisha's character and his honoring of God. And so that you can finish that out if you'd like, but our focus is on Naaman. And when we look at the big picture here, we see a couple things. We see the gospel, right? We see that loud and clear. But even more than that, in this context in time, if we were a Hebrew person reading this as our part of our Hebrew Bible, what we would be seeing here is the Abrahamic covenant being played out in a, not a new way, but in a, probably an irritating way, honestly, if we're honest about it. Because see, as Jews at this point in time, and then after for several centuries, their focus was on themselves. They viewed God and his presence and his work was focused on them. And what we have here is a young Jewish girl with a lot of faith. And she points a Syrian commander. So a foreigner, but not just a foreigner, the enemy, and not just the enemy, the one who leads the attacks against Israel, him, she points him to come back to Israel, only to be rejected by the king, the one who should be leading them, but isn't, well, to come to this prophet, to be healed, and then the enemy comes to faith. The Abrahamic covenant, the idea that all of creation is being brought back into community with God, is being played out with this man Naaman, who would have been despised by the Jewish readers of this and the Jewish people of this time. So it's taking the Abrahamic covenant that they should have understood, they should have seen it clearly, and it's opening it up in a very real way for the people to see. That yes, even the Syrian commander is wanted by God and is being pursued by God and is part of God's plan. We should probably reflect on that a little bit with the people of our lives. But as we look at Naaman and we look at the question we're asking ourselves today is, how do we respond when things don't go as planned? We think about Naaman. And where he started was obviously not a place of faith. He started as a warrior. He started, I'm sure, worshiping whatever gods they were worshiping in the Syrian community. But he found himself through these series of circumstances of coming to Elisha and to know God. You and I, our ability to deal with unexpected traumas of life is directly dependent upon our connectedness to God. Naaman, by himself, couldn't help himself. Naaman and God could. We have to know this. We have to know that our faith isn't about checking a bunch of boxes of good or bad, isn't about being in the right place at the right time. It isn't about doing the right things and not doing the wrong things. It is about knowing God. It is about being in relationship with him. It's about abiding in Christ. It is about this connectedness that existed in Genesis 1 and 2 that disappeared in Genesis 3, and all of creation and time since then, bringing that back into greater and greater fruition. And you and I, through Christ, through the cross, have the opportunity to be in relationship with him, to have that brought all back together. We will not handle unexpected traumas well without Christ, because we will be lost trying to do everything we can do to fix it. And just like Naaman, no matter how mighty, no matter how smart, no matter how brave, it won't work. And so here's what I want us to think about today. If you were in the military or some other maybe police or some other that type of work, you train in a controlled circumstance so that when you get in an uncontrolled circumstance, the right thing to do is more instinctive, right? We do it here 1,000 times so that when the chaos of this happens, muscle memory kicks in and we are more likely to do it right? So you and I, in the high times of life, on the hilltops, when life's good and easy, that's our training ground. It's more than that, of course. It's sacred ground. But if we cannot maintain our connectedness with God, if we cannot maintain that discipline, if we cannot have that relationship, that life-giving relationship here, we won't here. Because when all the unexpected chaos hits, and we're confused and we're disoriented and we don't know which way's up and what to do, and we're being asked all these questions that we don't know the answers to, we're in no better position to think rationally and calmly and know what to do. We must understand that how we handle those moments starts in the good times. And so today, maybe you're in one of the great times. You think back on the last several months, you're like, yeah, life's awesome right now, man. Great. How you doing with God? Because at some point, one's coming, right? There's a valley over the hill somewhere. Near or far, it's there. Some of you, maybe you're in the valley. The last month or 2 or 3 or whatever has been rough. You're like, man, I'm just happy I'm here today. All right. How are you and God? Let's come together and be connected with him. See, in those moments, what we have to recognize is our helplessness, our utter dependence upon him. That no matter what it is, who you are, what it is you bring to the table in terms of your strengths and your talents and all this, like you are completely dependent upon him. Just like Naaman. Like, what do you have to lose? Let's go to the river. That humility is so important. Because if we believe what we say we believe, that he is the true source of wisdom, that he is the true source of strength, that he is the true source of healing, the true source of peace, if he is truly the one who's in control, not us, if that is what we believe, then going and being connected with him is the best thing we could do. And that doesn't mean that it's all going to go hunky-dory from there, right? I mean, let's be honest. It doesn't always turn out right. Naaman had this huge blessing that he was healed. There are many times when we have had those phone calls and it hasn't ended in a healing. And so even as we walk, as Psalm 23 tells us, the dark valley, do we still trust him? All along that path, no matter how long it may be, no matter how rough and craggy it may be, no matter how dark the shadows get, do we still trust him? It's hard for us to step back and get a perspective when the pain is so great, but here's the reality, is that the goal of life isn't to be comfortable. It's to be faithful. And we can be faithful in all kinds of good situations and all kinds of bad situations, right? And we have to, even in the hardest of those pains, step back and understand that maybe the dark valley is the best place for us at this moment. And that as we walk through it, what God is doing is infinitely more important than comfort. It's hard to hear, isn't it? Especially if you've been in the valley for a while, right? I get it. God had been present with Naaman and working through him for years, and he just didn't know it. The same way, he's present with each of us in the good times and in the unexpected rough times. The question is, do we trust him? Do we trust him enough to go to the river, to go and to sit with him, to trust him as we walk the path? It's not easy, but that's what he's asking of us. We're going to close our time today taking communion together. Gentlemen, if you want to go ahead and come forward. We practice open communion, meaning if you believe in Jesus, no matter what church you may be a part of, if you would stake your faith in Jesus, you're welcome to partake with us today. So, gentlemen, go ahead and pass them out. There's 2 cups, I believe, one on top of each other, one with the bread underneath and the juice on top. As we take of these are reminders. These are anchor points for us. And as we talked about, salvation is so simple. And what you're holding is representations of that, reminders of that. And so today, maybe you're in one of the high seasons of life. Life's going good. It's a good anchor point, isn't it? To remind us where all the blessings are from. And maybe you're in the valley somewhere. Something unexpected has happened, and it has rocked your boat, something fierce. Right there's your anchor. So take a moment, just sit with God, and then we'll take together here in a few moments. Well, the bread represents his body that he gave for us. That sacrifice that allowed us to come back together with him. And so as we eat this, we're reminded of that. We're brought back to that place. And as we eat it, we claim this for ourselves. So would you eat with me, please? The juice represents his blood that was shed for us, the covering, mediated a new relationship, one of grace, one that says we can come as we are, that we're loved and we're accepted. So as we drink this, we're reminded of that. And we feel the safety, we feel the security of that in our lives. Would you drink with me? Father, I thank you for the story of Naaman. I thank you for this little blip, just one simple little chapter, but yet how, through your power, of course, it touches us so deeply. Father, I pray that all of us, whether we're on a hill or in a valley, would long for nothing more than you, knowing that you are truly what we need. I pray that we would humbly, consistently come and sit at your feet, just to be with you, that we would know you. Because, Father, we know that you are where healing happens. Father, I pray that we as humans like to complicate things. We like it our way. Usually isn't your way. I pray that we would hold these seasons of life out with open hands, allowing you to place in and take out what you will. We don't try to grab a hold. We don't try to take control. We don't try to fix. But we trust you with them. I pray that anyone here who does not know you as Lord and Savior would have the same posture of trust, of holding our lives out, of realizing that it isn't about working to be good enough, but it's these reminders that we just partook of Jesus and the sacrifice and this covenant of grace, this forgiveness that brings us back in, and simply by our faith in him, not making it more complicated, by simply having faith in Jesus and what you have done for us, that we can be saved. So, Father, I pray that as we sing our last song here, it would be a song of worship. It would be a place of gratitude, a place of hope, a place of courage. Like Naaman as he rode away, a place of knowing you in a new way. So, Father, I ask all this in Jesus' name.